The Know Your Gear podcast.
Hey, is guitar intonation overrated? On Throwbacks podcast, episode number 18, John and Matthew debated this topic. I watched them debate the topic. I watched their podcast on their Guitargument segment. So if you guys don't know, first of all, Throwback has a great podcast. You should check it out. Also, on the podcast, they have sections. Theirs is very organized. And one of the things is called the Guitargument, where they argue things. And one of the things they were arguing was whether basically tone or intonation was more importanter. I did that on purpose. I'm just being funny. More important. So, my thoughts are simple. Let's start with the easiest thing. Hopefully, it's the least controversial. The majority of players that I've done setups for could not even tell if the guitar was intonated or not. One thing I've noticed is that as tuners got better and cheaper, keep in mind cheaper is probably more important than cheaper. More important than accurate as they got cheaper, right? As they got cheaper, which means more guitar players had them and better ones, all of a sudden guitar players could hear their intonation. I'm not making this up. As I would do work on people's guitars, as more players got more tuners, all of a sudden they were like, my intonation's out. Before they could never tell. I know someone's always going to say, oh, I can tell. Good for you. That's good for you. But in my experience, the majority of players, when they told me their intonation out, they were telling me what the tuner was saying. And intonation is a little bit more involved than just your tuner. In other words, it's how hard you hit, it's how hard you push, it's the type of gauge strings you have, it's how tall your frets are. It's a lot of things that can interfere with intonation besides just intonating a guitar great. Just keep in mind something to understand. If I was to take a guitar, just any particular guitar, it doesn't matter which one, and I was to intonate it, in other words, set the intonation correctly, and then for all those, I doubt there's any real beginners here, but just in case, intonation is basically meaning that the notes, your open notes and your notes on your 12th fret are the same. Because the 12th fret on the guitar, whether it be acoustic or electric, is essentially the halfway point of the distance between the bridge and the nut. So you want those to be exactly the same, those notes. And so when the intonation is out, even if the guitar is in tune, in other words, you've tuned your open strings in tune, and you play a chord, all of a sudden you hear it sounds, I call it sour. Some people just may say it warbles or sounds strange. It's because the intonation is out, and you have to do that by adjusting the saddles or other things. I mean, there's other adjustments, but obviously the saddles are the main adjustment. But in my experience, when players told me the intonation out, it was because, like I said, the tuner said so. So I was, like I said, I could take any guitar, I could set up the intonation, and a player can make the intonation out. I don't mean from bad playing. I mean just they push down too aggressively, right? Or they push down, or their frets were too tall and they pushed down too aggressively. There's certain things. I found it was always better. It was easier to keep a guitar intonated with smaller frets. I just don't like smaller frets, so you have to push down a little bit lighter. And one of the things I used to show players. So just to give you understanding, when a player would tell me a guitar's intonation was out, sometimes their intonation was out. What I mean by them, it was them doing it. I would show them this exercise, and the exercise is simple. Basically, let me grab a guitar. Okay, so the exercise is simple. What you do is you pick any note on the fretboard, I don't care where, and you press down. Doesn't matter if you can't hear that right now. When you press down, what you want to do is put your finger right on top of the string. Okay, so it should sound like muted, like that, because you're just resting your finger on the string. You're not pushing any force. Then what I ask them to do is push down lightly until they make a note. And the note doesn't buzz. And then relax their finger, just relax, kind of take a breath, and see how light you can push that down and still make the note. And the thing to understand is that's to help me understand how hard you think you need to push a string down. So some players really think they need to push their finger so hard that it pushes through the fretboard, out the back of the neck, and touch their palm. I wish I was kidding. A lot of players like a lot of force. And if you use such force and your frets are tall and your strings are light, intonation is going to be almost an impossible task for you. Luckily, there's some fixes for that too. Basically, what I'm trying to say is intonation is more than just the calibration of the bridge and the setup of the guitar. It's actually the player too. These things are magical when they align, and they sometimes do. And that's what's great. So does intonation matter? Well, I'm going off the premise that most guitars and players are out of intonation. First of all guitars are technically not intonated perfectly, but we're not even going that deep into it. We're just going into, I would say most guitars, 6 out of 10 are not 100% intonated to the best of their abilities, and those players are not playing with the intonation and the, like I said, the relationship of their playing style to the guitar in the perfect, harmonious, perfect world of intonation. So my argument, it would be to agree with their argument, which is, I think, is that what they determined? The intonation didn't matter? You know what's funny is, I don't think I caught the end. I was really into it, but then I think sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I'm working, and then sometimes the work takes over and I got to go do something else.
Difference there.
I think there's.
It's not like it's an open shut case, really.
Yeah, it's like I think you can. I think it's very easy to obsess on good intonation, and think that somehow it's like really affecting the playability of the guitar. Whereas I think even really poorly intonated, you can fudge the tuning to work, and you don't really notice it if you're just playing. But that's my opinion.
But anyways, my point is to the intonation argument. I would say that intonation is very important, but I think there's a range in where it needs to be pretty good, because then when it's not good, you can obviously tell it's horrible and it sounds really sour and horrible. But when they remade the Frankenstein guitar for Eddie Van Halen, the $25,000 one, I actually, it was just fun the other day. I should show you guys. I actually have my promotional materials when I was a dealer for EVH and that guitar came out. And maybe one day I'll tell you about the story about that guitar. But anyways, so if you guys don't remember, they made a $25,000 Eddie Van Halen Frankenstein clone. And as you know, that was done by Fender, and the Fender guys were here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and they were next to my store, and I happened to be one of the first EVH dealers ever in the country. And they talked to me a lot about the stuff, and we got to see a lot of cool prototype and stuff. I even got to go there one day to the facility and see some cool stuff. And one of the things they told me, I'm just telling you the story they told me, was that when they were cloning Eddie Van Halen's, the real Frankenstein, its bridge post to the Floyd is in the wrong spot, and the guitar's intonation is slightly out. That it is not perfectly intonated. So they said that was a question of what are they going to do? I guess that's what they said. They were like, when they were cloning it, do you clone it exactly or do you fix the issue? And they gave some guesses. We had some talks. I want to not confuse the real story with the guesses. That was real talk. They told me that. I said, oh, and then some guesses were that when Eddie installed the Floyd, maybe he did it wrong. Maybe, right? I mean, it's, obviously, stuff like that. But whatever reason, it was not intonated perfectly. Perfect intonation as the guitar's full ability could be. And so maybe the assumption was it was recorded that way as well. So, I've always gone off Eddie played with the guitar with the intonation was slightly out. So I had a customer, he was my first negative customer. When I say negative, I don't mean the customer's negative. The first, I failed to give good service customer was an intonation issue customer. So I got their guitar, and it was a refret. I refretted their guitar, and I did a full setup and everything. And then they got the guitar, and there's a little bit more to the story that involves them. So I don't want to go into that because somebody might be able to figure out who that customer is that knows me and the customers. But the important part of the story was they got the guitar. They played the guitar. They loved the guitar. They went home. And I don't remember if they came back to the shop or if they called me. But whatever it was, they were like, the intonation's out on this guitar. And I'm like, oh, okay, we'll handle it. And then when they brought it back, it was the same thing. It was the tuner was telling them something was off. And I was like, well, can you hear it? And I was, and again, I'm not trying to be passive, like, oh, if can you even hear what you're saying? It was more of like I'm trying to, again, try to address how much of the player's interaction with the guitar is pushing it. Because like I said, I can only intonate it so far without really calibrating to the player. And the end of the story ended up being they took it to Guitar Center, of all places, and the Guitar Center tech fixed it. It was quite embarrassing, right? Look, I don't really have an ego, but, the Guitar Centers, especially then, weren't really known for having good guitar repair work and, to have somebody like fix my mistake. And I kind of obsessed over that, for a long time. And it probably was a good thing in the long run. I really obsessed over like, I got to fix this. I got to make sure I never make this mistake again. And it was probably months. It wasn't weeks, for sure. It wasn't years. So months later, the person came in the store and brought me another guitar. And I thought, oh, okay, you're like, I thought I'd never see this person again. I thought I failed them. And, they told me that it wasn't me, that actually that they realized now that really there was probably nothing wrong with the guitar, that they were just going through some stuff emotionally, and the intonation was probably fine, and they were just obsessing over it. And so I kept doing work for them, and I did work for them for many years after that. And but I know it sounds like, oh, that's horrible, but it wasn't horrible, because like I said, it really did cause me to do more of what I've just explained to you. Really think about intonation differently than just the guitar is intonated and that's the end of the story. It is really a lot of things. So yeah, that's my thoughts on intonation. I think it matters, but I think sometimes we obsess over it a little too much. And I think the only time, I've told you before, I had guitar players. That's why, like I said, I really I really appreciate. I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think how I want to say this. I basically admire. I'll say admire. That's a good word. I admire guitar techs in the Nashville area because I have had to do a lot of tech work for studio grade musicians who do Nashville style playing. Nashville country, really good stuff. There's not a lot of that in Arizona, but there is some, and those players are very good. And those players are, I told you before, they come in, they don't want their guitar intonated. They have sheets on how they want intonated. They want this string is so many cents flat. This string is so many cents sharp. They have, it's dialed in. That's a different world. So me personally, I also kind of think it has to do with the genre of music you play. So I like the saying, good enough for rock and roll. I find that throw some distortion and some power chords. I've had players, look, and I'm not going to argue with the customer. The saying, the customer's always right. I'm not going to argue with the customer, but sometimes I did chuckle and I'm like, okay, I'm not saying a lot. I'm just saying a few. It's always interesting when you're standing there and somebody who's basically playing only power chords through a very distorted crate amplifier is telling you how the intonation is out in the guitar. And I'm like, well, you're only really playing two notes. I can't even really hear either one. So, but you know what? You do your best you can, and that's my answer. So if you like this clip and you'd like to watch another one, you can click right here. And if you want to see the entire episode of the podcast, you can click right there. As always, thank you for your time and know your gear.